Welcome to The Matt Bernier Show.
What's going on? Welcome to The Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, Twitter, and Facebook. For the Daily Racing Form side of things, you can go on at DRF Inside Post on Twitter, as well as the Daily Racing Form Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is Friday, October the 27th, 2017. This is the guy, you know him, he's the voice, the face of the video here at the Daily Racing Form. He runs the whole department. Oh, wow. His name is Dan Illman. He hosts 99% of the products that we produce out here. And he's graced us with his presence here on this Friday afternoon, leading into the Breeders' Cup. We're only a week away. Illman?
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
It's going great. I mean, what an introduction.
Well,
it almost makes me feel someone important around here. I appreciate it.
Somewhat important.
Yeah.
Without you, this thing does not operate.
That's
without you and without the boys in the back room, this whole thing does not
Without the boys
go.
in the back room, there's nothing.
Well, the boys were having a heart attack when I was just standing up with about 20 seconds to go before this thing started. But neither here nor there. A couple things to go over for this week. We're going to break it up into two different segments instead of three that we normally do. The first half, I kind of felt like I was just going to come on and talk about it. But you and I talked a little bit yesterday afternoon when we left the office, went to a fine establishment down the street here on 3rd Avenue.
No, that place is a dump.
Well, I'm not going to be. God forbid our friends behind the bar table were listening to any of this and they find out that that's actually what we think of it. But neither here nor there. We talked about something that I had tweeted when we came into film Out of the Gate yesterday, which again you'll see Out of the Gate later on after this show is done. The idea that I don't understand why so many people really just genuinely despise the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Figure again, we're a week away from this race being run, as well as 3 other races on Breeders' Cup Friday. Distaff's obviously the highlight, but the amount of people that absolutely despise the Dirt Mile blows my mind. And I understand a lot of the feedback was initially, well, it's supposed to be a one-turn mile. I understand, but in a perfect world, it would be a one-turn mile. But unfortunately, recently anyway, where the Breeders' Cup has been run, it's just not a common thing.
Right. I mean, how many tracks have one-turn miles? I mean, you've got Belmont, you've got Churchill Downs, you've got Gulfstream.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a couple other ones. You've got, Laurel has it,
right.
Arlington, a couple of, but I mean, really, at this point, the only places that have had Breeders' Cups, you're looking basically at Belmont and Gulfstream. Who knows? Probably never going to go back to Gulfstream just because it's too small. Belmont, they need to do a couple different things before that happens again. So what you're left with is Santa Anita, which we're accustomed to, kind of the de facto home of the Breeders' Cup. Obviously, this year it's at Del Mar, but there's no way to run a one-turn mile. Right. Del Mar, no way to run a one-turn mile. Keeneland, 2 years ago, no way to run a one-turn mile. So you're left with either running the race with the circumstances that you have, and again, it's not ideal breaking into the far turn and all that other kind of stuff, but either that or you just don't run the race at all. And I don't think you can pick and choose when to run it. I don't think all of a sudden you can have certain years where there's 13 Breeders' Cup races and certain years where there's 12. Does that sound crazy to you?
No, it doesn't sound crazy. I mean, I think most people look at it, and I don't even think it's the one-turn or two-turn thing. I think from what I'm watching on social media, they're saying, well, horses are ducking the Classic, horses are ducking the Sprint. And that's a common argument from people that like to complain, I noticed, the ducking argument. And there are just some horses that are better suited to a mile. There are tweeners. We talk about it in the turf division all the time. I mean, there's the Breeders' Cup Mile. There's the Breeders' Cup Turf. How many horses are true mile-and-a-quarter types? You get a lot of them on turf, especially over there in Europe, and there's just not a race that fits them. And I think when you look at it, a lot of stallion managers for many, many years have said the stallion-making race is the Metropolitan Handicap, which is a one-turn mile, but it's a mile distance. A lot of stallion managers and breeders believe that a mile is the perfect combination of speed and stamina. Shouldn't we showcase that on the World Championship day? There are brilliant milers that listen. 6 furlongs is a little bit too sharp. A mile-and-a-quarter is way too far. You've got a case this year with a horse like Sharp as Tekka. That horse just fits a mile perfectly. There shouldn't be a Breeders' Cup race for a brilliant horse like Sharp as Tekka, whatever you want to think about the trainer. Because he runs in a mile, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I really think that the good milers, they handle one turn or two, no issue. We'll find out about Practical Joke. I'm not worried about it with him.
But that's the big thing, is that really just because these certain horses, they kind of are in no man's land in the middle of everything, because they don't truly want 10 furlongs, they don't truly want 3/4 of a mile, that means that we shouldn't see them on the weekend that we're supposed to have all of our stars. That to me holds no water. But going back to what you had said, people talk about horses ducking,
right.
And this is going to be the first one that we'll talk about. I think everyone just goes immediately to Liam's Map. We're going to take a look back 2 years ago. This was Liam's Map winning the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Kurt Becker with the call.
To third, has to catch Lee coming off the far turn. Lee has the lead by 3. Liam's Map takes aim into the final furlong of the Las Vegas Dirt Mile. Liam's Map just keeps striding forward and takes the lead from Lee. Redvine is third, but it's Liam's Map and Javier Castellano to take it. Lee was home second.
Now, obviously, that was against a little bit of a lesser field, and I think that's the other argument a lot of people have been making, that, you know what, this race allows maybe horses that aren't necessarily Breeders' Cup caliber to be running on Breeders' Cup weekend. My argument is a horse like Liam's Map, I personally don't think he would have been able to get 10 furlongs. And everybody says he was ducking American Pharoah. I mean, I don't know that he couldn't get 10 furlongs, but at the same time, if I'm the connections, why wouldn't I go to that race?
I printed out Liam's Map's past performances, just to refresh my memory. And Liam's Map, before the Woodward, the race preceding the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, a race where he went wire to wire, he earned a 114 Beyer speed figure, and you would assume would be a prep for the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah.
Looking at his 2 races, he ran a 2-turn mile and a 16th at Gulfstream, the Harlan's Holiday. He was all out to beat a nice horse, Valid, but he beat him by a half length. Valid was never going to win a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic. The Whitney, the race before the Woodward, he had a 5-length lead in the stretch, and he blew it, and Honor Code, a nice horse, ran by him in the lane. I think 1.25 miles was a little bit far. I think Todd Pletcher, who trained Liam's Map, learned a lesson from several years before, when he had a choice. Dirt Mile, Breeders' Cup Classic, with one of the most brilliant horses we've seen in recent years making his mark as a stallion, Uncle Mo. He went for the Classic. It didn't work out. Uncle Mo probably wins the mile that year very, very impressively off of his prior performance in the Kelso. A, I think Todd realized that this horse had some stamina issues. B, this is probably a special circumstance where, yeah, he was ducking American Pharoah.
You think so?
I think he understood what American Pharoah was. I think he said, I'm going to run a horse that has had physical problems, a horse that may not be able to get 1.25 miles, against one of the Triple Crown winner who's going to be, what, 1-5 in the race? Am I running for second money here, or am I trying to win the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, a very prestigious race, and of course, a stallion-making race? I think in this circumstance, maybe the ducking was warranted, but it was the right move.
Okay, now, but let's go back to Uncle Mo, who you had brought up. When they ran him in the Classic, they could have easily run him in the mile.
Absolutely.
And guess what? The mile was 1 turn that year.
He would have been the favorite, and a heavy one.
Why do you think that decision was made then? Because maybe it was a matter of that field wasn't spectacular. Again, I believe that was the year that Drosselmeyer may have won. So, I mean, we're talking about kind of a subpar group. But, I mean, why do you think a decision like that was made? I mean, is your stud value increased that exponentially if you win the Classic?
I think it does. Breeders' Cup Juvenile Classic winner would be a pretty impressive feat. I think, again, the reason why Todd wins a lot of races is, of course, he has the best stock, but also he knows how to properly place his horses. And I think he viewed the Classic that year as if ever Uncle Mo could get the 1.25 miles, it was going to be against that field. Yeah. And he was wrong. I think in this case he understood that everything was conspiring against him. Distance, American Pharoah equals Run Liam's Map as a 1-2 favorite, by the way, in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. And as we saw, he won like a 1-2 shot.
And you know, if he had run in the Classic that year, he's the second choice, likely. He's probably going off in the 4-1 range as the second choice, because American Pharoah, I believe, was 6-5 or even money somewhere in there. I guess I just kind of look at it, and I don't like... And you agree right there. You say that you think that part of it was them ducking American Pharoah, and you know what? Maybe that was what the case was. I guess I just don't... I don't think it's fair to the other horses, and we're going to talk about now the one that you had touched on this year, who's kind of case in point for this argument, Sharp Azteca. I don't think it's fair to take a horse that I have no idea whether Sharp Azteca would be able to get 10 furlongs. I highly doubt it. But I also don't think he could go 3/4 of a mile. It seems very, very sharp. To me, it just doesn't seem like it makes any sense. You know what? Let's take a look. This is Sharp Azteca winning the Kelso. Larry Colmus with the call.
Trying to shake away at the top of the stretch here. 3/4 in 1:10.24. They're into the stretch, and it is Sharp Azteca, who has opened up here to a 3-length lead coming to the furlong pole. And Dividing Rod is second, followed by Tommy Macho, Tom's Ready, and Ross. But Sharp Azteca's in the clear as 16th out. And Sharp Azteca's going to go all the way to win the Kelso. Sharp Azteca by 4 under the wire to Dividing Rod.
I mean, it was a brilliant, brilliant performance. And I just think it's kind of one of those things where, again, if he doesn't fit at 3/4 of a mile, he doesn't fit at 10 furlongs, why wouldn't you have a race at 8?
Just think about this. The Classic division all year long has so many prestigious races. But you could say that the mile division, simply because of races like the Metropolitan Handicap and the Cigar Mile late in the year, these are two very prestigious races that people want to win. Those two races, we're not counting Breeders' Cup races, are way more prestigious than many of the sprint prep races. Races like the Forgo, races like and the San Diego Sprint Championship.
Sure.
The races people want to win, owners, breeders. Races like the Met, the Cigar. Milers should have a chance to shine, whether it's one turn or two turn, so be it. I think the good ones, the true champions that we're trying to crown on Breeders' Cup Day, they overcome.
Absolutely, and I think that's just one of those things too. My argument that I also brought up yesterday, and I'm curious, agree, disagree, we talked about it a little bit, but the idea that if on the turf side of things, you have the Breeders' Cup Turf, you have the Breeders' Cup Mile, you have the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. On the dirt side, why would you only have them? For the longest time they did. Why would you only have the sprint and the classic and no middle ground? I don't understand that.
I think the symmetry is nice. I agree. Whether you think there should be a turf sprint or not. But I agree, there should be a turf sprint, a mile, and of course you've got the turf race. There's no reason why there shouldn't be a mile race. I know people think it gives some owners an easy way out. I don't really think so when you look at the difference in the money.
Absolutely.
If you got a horse that you think, I mean, Todd Pletcher turned down, I don't know what the Breeders' Cup purse was that year, it might have been $8 million. Now, I mean, whatever it was in 2015, to be 1-2 for $2 million. He did what was best for the horse in that situation. In all likelihood, if Liam's Map runs in the Breeders' Cup Classic, he sets the pace. American Pharoah's breathing down his throat, and who knows what happens. In all likelihood, he gets beat and is maybe an exhausted horse just eating dirt in the stretch. Sure. You could say ducking or not, but at the end of the day, you know, the hand of self-interest, the economic hand of self-interest is going to guide many of these owners, and they're obviously going to guide it to the Classic.
And a lot of people, and the last thing we'll touch on before we just go into more broad Breeders' Cup sort of talk, a lot of things that were brought up yesterday in that whole Twitter sort of conversation, which I love all these things when all of a sudden you get 40 different people going back and forth. I think that's why,
well, that's what Twitter's all about.
That's what it's all about. You get the conversation going, whether you agree or disagree, everybody's got their opinion. I think a lot of people were saying, well, you know, the dirt mile has never produced any champions, eclipse-wise. It's never really produced any major serious racehorses afterward. You brought up something yesterday. Keep in mind, how many of the dirt miles have been run over synthetic surfaces at Santa Anita?
Well, we were talking about that not only were some of those dirt miles run over synthetic, you had Corinthian, I think, win the mile in Monmouth. It wasn't even slap. It swam home.
Yeah, right.
Doing the dirt mile. So how many dirt miles have there been at the end of the day? I mean, let's be patient here.
Especially early on, too, because it kind of felt like that was a feeling out, what are we doing here?
It was a feeling out process. I think a lot of the owners were still probably prepped. Now there's a prep to get to a race like the dirt mile.
Yes.
You know, you have to condition trainers now to prep for a race like this when all this time they've been prepping for a race like either the Classic or the Sprint. But you're right, several of these races were synthetic. Several of these races were over wet track. Let's give this race a little bit of time. Liam's Map was a brilliant winner. Yeah. In 2015. He was a deserving horse. I mean, you look at him, he had 4 Beyer speed figures of 112 or greater from only 8 lifetime starts. It's a shame he was ouchy. Yeah. And again, you look at this pedigree, just like, out of a trippy mare, is he really going to get the mile and a quarter?
It seems unlikely.
I think Todd weighed the pros and cons. I mean, the biggest con was American Pharoah. So if you want to call that ducking, I can understand anyone that calls that ducking. I'm going to say it was in the best self-interest for the horse.
And I think you bring up a good point, though. The early years of the dirt mile, all the trainers and connections have been conditioned to look at it either as the Classic or the Sprint or no Breeders' Cup. Now that it's become a race, it's become a thing. And I'm not just saying it just happens to be this year. Look at the prospective field this year, where you've got Sharp Azteca, you've got More Spirit, you've got Practical Joke, you've got Accelerate, you've got some horses possibly coming over for Aidan O'Brien, whether it's War Decree or it's Churchill or it's Lancaster Bomber, whoever it may be. And then you've got a couple of other intriguing horses that are going to try to stretch out and go 8 furlongs. I just think it's one of those things. Again, I understand breaking into the turn, far from ideal, but I think this is going to be a fantastic race.
And I still think there's a feeling out process from a trainer standpoint how to properly get a horse to this race, because the way the contenders you mentioned, completely different situations. More Spirit has not run since the Metropolitan Handicap. Baffert grade off layoffs. It has worked in the sprint races. It has worked in the classics. Will it work in the mile? A horse like Sharp Azteca has done a little bit of everything this year. Since the Met Mile, it's a 2-turn race at Monmouth. 1-turn race last time out, 7/8. No issue. Practical Joke's done a little bit of everything this year. Accelerate. They tried the big boys in the Classic. That didn't work out. Now we turn back to the comfort zone.
Isn't he the perfect example of a reason why you need a race like this? Talent-wise, he's every bit as good as some of these other horses, but he showed he can't get 10 furlongs, and you know he can't go 6.
I think the argument we've made that Callaway's probably not as good as some of these horses. I mean, he beat American.
He runs 110 buyers.
He's run what? How many 110 buyers?
3, I believe.
I mean, Accelerate run.
Yeah, it's not like he's a. But I guess that's the thing. Like that right there.
I think Accelerate is actually the indictment. I think that's not the argument you're trying to make. I think a lot of folks would be saying there should not be a Breeders' Cup race. And this is no disrespect to the horse. We've always been big fans of it. It's come out of nowhere.
How many horses can run 110 buyers?
It just
not
seems,
many.
But Seymour Deeney can run 113 buyers. I mean, if buyers were the be-all and the end-all, I mean...
They're a major piece to this puzzle. Don't dismiss them.
I'm not dismissing them. I just think that in a situation like Accelerate is a horse where I think the problem is he won that race. He showed he was a brilliant miler. He beat Arrogate. I'm getting old. They run him in the Pacific Classic. It doesn't work out. And I think that right there is the chink that maybe the Dirt Mile is sort of the consolation prize. And I think we have to talk about it as a consolation prize. That's not a knock on the race itself. It's a very prestigious race for milers, but of course, you're going to get the champions from the Classic division.
I guess I just don't understand that, though, where he's right there with Collected at the quarter pole.
Yeah.
And then he can't go on with him.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why does that mean that he's just clearly this is a cop-out? He can't go 10 furlongs.
No, he can't go 10 furlongs. I'm not saying it's a cop-out, but I really think the champions have been, and they've been decided in American racing for how many years, by the Classic winners, by the winners of the Jockey Club before the Breeders' Cup.
Because you're not going to be a champion means you shouldn't be able to run in a Breeders' Cup?
No, I'm not saying there shouldn't be a race. I'm saying that when you're making an argument for if you wanted to make an argument for Sharp as Tekka, fine.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make an argument for Practical Joke, fine. If you want to make an argument for More Spirit, I think there are some folks that are like, well, why can't More Spirit run 1.25 miles? I agree with you and Baffert say, listen, he's a middle distance horse. He's a tweener. He doesn't want to go 1.25 miles. This is his comfort zone. Look at how he's bloomed and blossomed at the shorter route distances. To me, I don't know. I think Accelerate's just a situation where brilliant miler. They've tried him against the big boys at the big distance, and it didn't work out. And you're right, he's going to cut back to a distance that's very comfortable for him, and he is a main contender and a very talented horse. The Classic winner is where the champion is going to be made.
100%.
And the mile division is kind of the consolation prize, but there's nothing wrong with having a consolation prize. But I think we have to look at it that way by saying they deserve a race, but it can't certainly be given the same prestige as the Classic division even.
No, but I guess that's the thing. The problem that I have with such the severe kickback on the idea of the Dirt Mile is that you're right. Chances are you're never going to get a champion out of that race. But that's not because it's not.
It's not because they're not talented horses.
Exactly.
It's not like they don't deserve to be there.
I feel like everyone just
Accelerate certainly deserves to be in the Breeders' Cup.
Exactly. I guess that's my point.
He deserves to be in the Breeders' Cup.
So instead of that, I mean, and that's the thing. If he didn't have this race, we don't get to see one of. I mean, and whether you like him or not, or you think he's a little bit lesser than some of the other ones, the idea that we wouldn't get to see a horse that can run that well that weekend. And look, you brought up Seymour Deeney. Seymour Deeney has extenuating circumstances.
There are going to be fans that are going to bring up the ducking competition to be contrarians, and then we're using that word kind of.
Sure.
I mean, how many times did we hear that Run
Trolls.
Happy was ducking the Breeders' Cup Classic and running in the sprint? There were some people that were like, he was. I mean,
how insane was that?
It's silliness.
I mean,
what we're trying to do is build the sport. It's not easy.
No.
The way to build the sport is to put stars on the track.
Absolutely.
In every single division. And hopefully, knock on wood and fingers crossed, there aren't going to be any notable defections over the next few days coming into the Breeders' Cup. But we want stars.
Yeah.
And the Dirt Mile is going to have a good field of talented horses. Some of them, perhaps Practical Joke, some of these that might show up as 4-year-olds, and who knows?
Absolutely.
You know, the sky could be the limit for some of these horses. We want to build these different divisions, build these different stars, because as we see, our main horses in the Classic division win 4 or 5 times a year.
And then
you got to fill in the gap. And the way you're going to sell this to television down the road, the way you're going to sell this to fans is you have to create stars out of horses. And I think the Dirt Mile is a way to fit that. Liam's Map was a star horse. It's a shame he only ran 8 times.
And we wanted to see him. We needed to see him. And you know what? Okay, if you want to say he was ducking Pharaoh,
I think in that situation he was.
One last thing before we let you go. I know you haven't gone through and done the full-blown deep dive into all these. The one horse you're most forward to watching run next weekend.
Boy, Arrogate.
To see what you get.
Listen, you got it. Listen, he is the kind of horse where if you know he shows up with his race, Gunrunner is a very talented horse, what a tremendous run. But if you just look at it and forget all the handicapping and say Gunrunner is the best 9-furlong horse in the country, Arrogate's the best 10-furlong horse in the country, this race is at 10 furlongs, the end of your handicapping. Done. But there are so many questions. And this is such an exciting horse, and he's such a polarizing horse. There are some that said he's the greatest horse we've ever seen. There are some that said he's overrated. We're going to find out.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the big fight feel, right? Put up or shut up time. And very rarely do we get the put up or shut up with a horse that's done so many money earnings record holder. You don't have to prove anything to anybody.
Yeah.
But he's got to prove everything, and that's the great thing about this year's Classic. He's the horse everyone I think wants to see.
And isn't it one of those things? He doesn't need to win by 100 if he just wins. Period.
Boy, if he just wins,
solidifies.
He puts everything to bed. I think because I think if he wins by a nose, a lot of people would say he won despite hating the track.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And listen, you feel bad for Gun Runner's connections. You feel bad for Collected's connections.
100%.
I mean, these are
Same
horses that have just done some tremendous things this year, and they're just still in the shadow of Arrogate.
Yeah.
It's remarkable, this horse, the popularity he has, the brilliance he's shown on the track. But again, you very rarely see a horse that's done the things he's done. He has to actually now put up and shut up.
You had brought up a comparison to Gunrunner a little while, well, really all year, and we'll find out if it plays out this way. You kind of think he may be a Medaglia d'Oro-ish, where at 9 furlongs you think he was the best you'd ever seen.
Medaglia d'Oro was one of the best 9-furlong horses I'd ever seen, and he was able to win at 1.25 miles, and he gave him the right circumstances. But you saw him in a couple of classics, Dubai, I believe, where he just couldn't get the 1.25 miles. I mean, Valpone beats you in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Valpone's, listen, shocking win. You don't want to get 1.25 miles. I wonder if that's the case with Gunrunner. Now, maybe the jury's still out. But I mean, look at the trips in the Dubai World Cup.
Yeah.
I mean, that race it's not like that race was 6 years ago. That race was only a few months ago.
Yeah.
And Gunrunner had an easy time again, and Arrogate basically was tied up in the gate. And everything you threw against that horse, Arrogate ran right by him.
Yeah.
We're going to find out what Gunrunner is, and it's a great matchup. You've got a nice supporting cast as well.
Absolutely.
They are by far from the only 2 horses in this race.
100%.
West Coast could be the sleeper, and Baffert wins with a smile on his face and also kind of a tear in his eye.
Going for 4 in a row, Baffert is. You can follow him on Twitter at @DRF_Dan Ellman.
That's correct.
That is correct. It's right there on the bottom of the screen if you're watching live. Dan Ellman, thanks for coming by.
My pleasure.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll dive into a quick review, a quick preview, some football. We'll wrap it all up in about 10 minutes here in the Matt Bernier Show.
California Chrome, straight and strong. Absolutely sensational. California Chrome. California Chrome. California Chrome. Away to the Kentucky Derby. California Chrome wins impressively.
He's gone into overdrive. California Chrome wins the Dubai World Cup.
One of the greatest performances you'll ever see.
Chrome turns to gold.
Say goodbye to your inner caveman. If you're making caveman bets on pick sixes, you could be leaving money on the table. DRF Bets Ticketmaker helps you build more profitable exotic bets and place them with one click. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticketmaker. Be a samurai with your ROI. DRF Bets Ticketmaker helps you cut out unprofitable exotic bets before they happen and be the master of profits. Raise your game with DRF Bets Ticketmaker, the exotic wagering app.
Well, the amazing thing about our work was just how similar he is to Uncle Mo. I mean, right away, of all of Rapoli's babies, he stood out as the most advanced, the most precocious, and the most talented, and that was exactly the same thing we'd seen a few years before with Uncle Mo.
Outwork wins it for John Velasquez.
To be able to win a Grade 1 like the Wood Memorial in only his 4th lifetime start was very impressive.
It is Outwork in front. Win, the winner of the Gun Handicap.
This horse is the complete package. He's won from 7 furlongs to 1.8 miles. He's won on dual surfaces. He's won with and without Lasix, and he's traveled around the world and brought his A game with him.
He showed that he was a very top-class dirt horse.
Balance is key, and he was just perfectly proportioned. It's what made him so athletic and so efficient on the track.
12:22 on the East. 9:22 on the West, the Matt Bernier Show here on DRF TV. I'd like to thank Dan Illman for swinging by, talking some Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, because again, I just thought it was a great conversation. It still is ongoing on Twitter. However you feel, whichever side of the aisle that you're on, good to have all that kind of conversation going on. So we got about 8 minutes left, 7 or 8 minutes. We're going to crank out review, preview, and some football picks here as fast as possible. Let's go back into last week. Let's start off Empire Classic here at Belmont Park. The horse I liked was Control Group. I thought a vulnerable favorite was Twisted Tom for Chad Brown Javier. Guess what? Here's the replay.
And Control Group will cut the corner with a narrow lead. Twisted Tom off the turn, dead even now. The two of them straighten out in the Empire Classic. Twisted Tom to the front. Control Group tries to fight on second by 4. Can You Dig It is taken third. Papa Shot is fourth. Then Governor Malibu on the far outside, but it's Twisted Tom. Twisted Tom and Javier Castellano are going to take the Empire Classic, and they're going to win it by 2.5 lengths.
Couldn't ask for much more from Control Group. He tried, not as good as Twisted Tom. Twisted Tom continues to improve. The Buyers have kind of stabilized. They haven't really improved. You earned a 91 there in the Empire Classic on the heels of a 92 in the Albany up at Saratoga, but you look at the way that he runs, distance, all those sorts of things are going to be his friend as he goes on as a 4-year-old for Chad and company. A good effort there. So swing and a miss there on the vulnerable favorite. My pick ran well enough, though, to run second. We pick it up, though, with these next two races. The Raven Run, I thought the most likely winner in the race, and my pick was Miss Sunset coming in from Southern California for Jeff Bondi. Here's the stretch run.
A gap of 3. Torrent is moving up third on the outside. Pretty City Dancer in fourth. Techie Lita fifth back toward the rail. Here's Miss Sunset to challenge Shalone past the 8th pole. Torrent 3 lengths away in third. Final furlong of the Lexus Raven Run. Shalone to the inside. Miss Sunset on the outside, battling past the 16th pole. Torrent is third. Miss Sunset putting ahead in front. Miss Sunset to win it for Julian.
I think the 7/8 of a mile was the big difference there between her and Shalone. Shalone tried her hard out down on the inside. I just don't think 7/8 of a mile is really her friend. Miss Sunset, she gets the job done. Not a huge mutual. I believe she went off at 3-1, but good to know. Winner pick. We move on from there. We go out to Southern California, the California Flag. Thought this was an interesting race where the two favorites, the two heavy favorites, I thought they had distance questions about going 6.5 furlongs. Thought that maybe they were best going 5/8. So I thought a live long shot. My pick was going to be B Squared in this spot. Michael Rona with the call.
Length and a half to Gold Rush Dancer. B Squared being brought to the outside by Gutierrez. Richards Boy strides away from Tribalist at the 3/16, puts 2 lengths on him. B Squared is next, followed by Gold Rush Dancer. Richards Boy the leader from Tribalist. B Squared finishing strongly down the outside. Richards Boy has to dig. B Squared's coming at him. B Squared reels in Richards Boy, and B Squared gets up to meet Richards Boy. Third in the race was
B Squared gets the job done for the Redhams. Doug O'Neill, Mario Gutierrez, 7-1 winner there as my pick, and a little bit of a live long shot in that spot. So a good handicapping weekend for us last weekend as far as the races are concerned. We'll dive into the football momentarily, but let's give you 2 races to go over this coming weekend, tomorrow afternoon actually. One of them is going to be at Keeneland, closing weekend at Keeneland. One of them is going to be at Santa Anita, closing weekend at Santa Anita. Let's take a look at the Fayette. This is going to be the Formulator Race of the Day, actually. You can head over to the Race of the Day page, get all your free Formulator past performances and whatnot. If you're new to this show, far right, those are my odds, not a morning line. I'm going to give it to you right in order. If you're just listening, the 1, Giuseppe the Great, 13-1. The 2 is Neolithic, 5-2. Fear the Cowboy, 32-1. The Player, 5-1. Honorable Duty, 3-1. McCracken, 8-1. Malibu Pro, 8-1. I think the most likely winner of this race, we're going to take a look at his run in the Woodward. That is Neolithic. Now look, Neolithic is the horse that is all out down on the inside right now. Gunrunner just blew his doors off. You're going to see Rally Cry come up and go by Neolithic as well. There's a part of me, the only reason I think that Neolithic is the most likely winner of the Fayette is simply because he has just an enormous tactical advantage in this race. He is as loose as he wants on the front end. I think Robbie Alvarado has one job: send him to the front and try to go on. You don't need to go 46 and change to get to the front here in this spot on Saturday afternoon. Theoretically, you could go 48 and somebody else will be still a length or change off you. I think Neolithic's the most likely winner. He is not my pick, though. My pick in the race is the Player, although I have some reservations and some concerns about ultimately how far he wants to go. Let's go to Southern California. 3-year-olds going a mile and an eighth on the turf. It's the Twilight Derby. Let's take a look at that field. You've got a field of 11 signed on in here, right in post position order. The number 1, Sistron, looks like he could be loose on the lead. Don't think he wants 9 furlongs. 32-1. Cowboy Culture, 19-1. Big Score, 6-1. Bowie's Hero, 9-1. Just Howard coming in from Maryland, the Maryland bred, 5-1. Sharp Samurai, the winner of the Del Mar Derby, 7-2. Trouble with the T, 19-1. Channel Maker coming in from his effort against older horses, 6-1. Profiteer, 16-1. Dangerfield and Ann Arbor Eddie, they're numbers 10 and 11, both of them 49-1. I think the most likely winner of the race is Sharp Azteca. I mentioned he's the winner of the Del Mar Derby. We're going to take a look at his win in the Del Mar Derby over a couple of common foes that he'll face again here tomorrow afternoon. Bowie's Hero, as well as Big Score. But you're going to see in the red silks right now, Gary Stevens has made the front. You're going to see Big Score try on the outside, hanging on his left lead. Bowie's Hero is down in between horses, the number 3. Sharp Samurai just continues on with it. He's a professional racehorse. I think there's a lot to like about this horse. I think he's going to continue to improve. I think Mark Gladson did a tremendous job. He's my pick, and I think he's the most likely winner. A live long shot, though, I think is Channel Maker. Channel Maker's most recent start we're going to take a look at. This was in the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic at Belmont Park. Now, the problem is he's already wide and he's back there kind of mid-pack. He's not going to make up any real ground. And I think the big thing is just to keep in mind, he was going up against older horses, and I'm convinced, I know he ran well and he won the Breeders last time, 2 starts back, I should say, up at Woodbine at 1.5 miles. I really think that he is more of a 1 1/8 mile kind of horse, and we've always seen East Coast turf horses, when they ship west, they've got some sort of an advantage on the turf. Simply put, maybe our turf horses are better than theirs are. And guess what? I think it's the other way around. I think the West Coast dirt horses are better than our turf horses here, or our dirt horses, excuse me, on the East Coast. I think the most likely winner is Sharp Samurai. I think a live long shot is Channel Maker in the Twilight Derby. Only giving you 2 simply because everybody's focused on the Breeders' Cup. We're only a week away. Let's dive into some NFL picks, though. Last weekend, just basically a complete wash for me. 1-1-1. The Dolphins game, miraculously, Craig, sorry about the Jets. My God, that was a disaster. Dumpster fire there. They're up by 14 with, 9 minutes to play. Somehow that ends up being a push for me. The other 2 games, it was a split. 1 win and 1 loss. Let's take a look, though. We'll start off with the first game. I'm going to go Bears at Saints. The Saints are laying 9. I think the Bears are really bad. I think the Saints are continuing to improve. That was a gutsy win, not a brilliant win last weekend up at Green Bay, and I know Brett Hundley is in now for the Packers, but I think the Saints down in New Orleans at the Superdome are just an entirely different team. 9 points, it's a lot, but there's a part of me that just thinks they kind of blow the doors off the Bears. Mitch Trubisky, maybe at some point he'll end up being something good, but you know what? Right now, I'm just going to lean on the team that I know, the proven commodity. Give me the Saints -9. By the way, and I have to go back to last week real quick, I said I wasn't convinced just yet about the whole Carson Wentz thing. I'm starting to buy in. He looked pretty damn good Monday night against the Redskins. Anyway, let's move on. Atlanta Falcons -4.5 at the New York Jets. It seems like every week I have the Jets in here somehow. I don't know why. I don't know how. I have a feeling, as much as the Falcons are going to be looking toward next week, you got to face the Panthers in Carolina. And we always talk about you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself and you're thinking about bigger things down the road. Considering the way they played last Sunday night in New England up at Foxborough, I have to assume that they're going to have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. And the Jets, on the heels of just such a bad loss, I wonder now if you're at the point where it's just all in on, I don't want to say tank mode, but it should have been like that from day one. Any Jets fan would realize that. You should have been trying to lose every game, if at all possible. I think that the Falcons are going to rebound. 4.5 just seems like a small number. Almost one of those that it's like stink, kind of fishy. Like, it should be higher even though they're on the road. I still think the Falcons are just going to kind of take care of business, go out there. I think they win by at least a touchdown. They go on next week, a big game in Carolina. We go on to the third game of this weekend, Sunday night. Pittsburgh Steelers -2.5 at the Detroit Lions. I've had a tough time with this one because I always love a good home team getting some points. But I think the Steelers are kind of getting things going. They're going into a bye week next week. I kind of feel like this is just, let's empty the tank right here. I know they've had all the Martavis Bryant nonsense, and Juju Smith-Schuster, he lost his bicycle. It was returned. Good news for Juju. And he's a talented player, talented on the outside, and I think he's going to get a lot more touches in this spot here, or at least a lot more targets from Roethlisberger. You got to respect any team that has Le'Veon Bell, and it seems like he's finally called those first 4 or 5 weeks for Le'Veon, basically his preseason, because he didn't do anything because he was holding out. Now he shows up. I think you're going to see him really take off. He had a big week last week. I think 170 all-purpose yards. So recap. Bears at Saints. Saints -9. Give me laying the points there. Falcons -4.5 at the Jets. Steelers -2.5 at the Lions. Hopefully we can get closer to 500. It is 12:32, so we went a little bit long here on this show, but it was good because we had Illman in here. I thought it was a good conversation to kick things off. If you listen to this after you listen to the DRF Players podcast, the boys normally are on at 11 o'clock on Fridays. Maybe they talked about it. I don't know. I was on my way in here to work. Next week, the tentative plan, depending on travel, is Wednesday night. We will be taping a 2-hour-ish joint podcast between the DRF Players Podcast and the Matt Bernier Show. We'll be going over all 13 Breeders' Cup World Championship races because guess what? Next Friday and Saturday, it's the Breeders' Cup. It's finally here. I don't think without question, it's without question the best betting weekend of the year, and you could make the case, depending on how you view the Kentucky Derby, the second biggest weekend as far as horse racing is concerned in the United States. So a lot of good things to look forward to there. Again, Wednesday night we'll be taping that. Should be out, I would assume, sometime Thursday morning, and things will be good to go from there. Obviously, stay tuned to live.drf.com, video.drf.com, all sorts of good stuff next week as far as video content for the Breeders' Cup. There's going to be 2 out-of-the-gate editions. We'll throw that into that momentarily. You'll have there will be no visuals as far as the 2-hour joint podcast that we'll have, but with this show anyway, if you want to follow me on Twitter, @Bernier_Matt, so you can get involved in some more of those outrageous, fantastic conversations that we had about the Dirt Mile. If you watch on live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Form's Twitter handle, @DRF Inside Post, or on Daily Racing Form Facebook page. Thank you for doing so. If you listen to this thing, as far as the podcast is concerned, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. We crammed a lot into 33 minutes. Thank you to the boys in the back for winging it with me, or at least me winging it. They were ready to go. They're telling me we got 20 seconds. We're going to go live. So apologize for that late entrance here. But hey, thought it was a good show. Had some fun. Good luck this weekend, and get ready. We've got those pre-advanced PPs. They're already out. I believe they're going to draw everything on Monday. You get final sort of post positions and all that good stuff. We're finally here, the Breeders' Cup World Championships next Friday and Saturday. Without further ado, let's throw it into Out of the Gate. We'll talk to you again soon.